Hello and welcome to Archvelder's Hacks with Archvelder and his amazing hacks. In this video I'm going to show you some simple but useful tricks to speed up your leveling. This first trick will allow you to effectively use your Hearthstone with no cooldown and will save you a ridiculous amount of time. This has to be one of the most useful hacks I've ever published. This one is an improvement on a much older technique from way back in the original Vanilla and Burning Crusade, known as Ghetto Hearthing, which worked like this. Two players formed a group and entered a dungeon. One player left the party and received a 1-minute countdown, at the end of which they were teleported to their hearth location, crucially without their Hearthstone going on cooldown. This technique works to this day, but obviously can't be used by solo players. Until now. You see, the way party invites work nowadays is that just inviting someone creates a group of one instantly, whether the invited person accepts or not. So you can literally invite anybody inside a dungeon, instantly leave the party of one you've created, and then get ported to your hearth location. Now, there's a potential issue with this in that you may confuse or alarm somebody by inviting them out of the blue. It doesn't really matter that much in the general scheme of things, but if you have an irrational fear of communicating with someone you don't already know, i.e. you are English, then here's the perfect solution. Simply log on to another character on your account. If you don't have one, create one. A level 1 is fine. Now press Alt plus F4 and close the client. Do not log out, just Alt plus F4. Log back in on the character you want to port and invite the previous character. A group UI should now be created and you can now leave the party of one you've just created. In addition, you can still port straight to your faction capital by clicking on Escape, Support, and then selecting the Stuck Character option and following the steps. This works every 8 hours. The Text States Alliance characters will be moved to Westfall, but currently on the Burning Crusade Classic they are being ported to the Gates of Stormwind. When dealing with especially tough NPC quest mobs solo, i.e. those designed to be killed by multiple players, you need every drop of DPS you can get your hands on. The following method allows you to extend the duration of certain buffs. For example, the flame caps you can find in Zagamarsh increase my mage's fire spell damage by 80. They last for a full minute, but have a 3-minute cooldown, obviously to prevent players using them back to back. You can get around this by using a flame cap, then logging out and waiting for the 3 minutes. During your time logged out, the flame cap buff duration won't change, but the cooldown will go down in real time, thereby allowing you to log back in and use up the remaining 40 seconds of the original flame cap buff, and then immediately use another for a total of 1 minute and 40 seconds of increased spell damage. This works for any damage increase buff, which is longer than 20 seconds, and is something I've been using for years with potions and bloodlust type abilities. The Burning Crusade was originally designed for computers with a tiny fraction of that of PCs today, which creates some odd anomalies. With graphics on max, you literally cannot see any of the quest items for this quest here in Nagrand. Now, when I turn down the settings to minimum, suddenly it all becomes much clearer, making the quest significantly easier to complete. You can actually extend this principle and literally see through solid objects, including buildings and scenery. But that's something probably best left for my patrons, since I really don't want that one fixed. Methods to quickly level weapon skills are one of the oldest exploits in Warcraft. The classic method being to level up with attacks on Dr. Boom here, as neither he nor his bombs retaliate against ranged attacks out of his immediate area. As you can see here, I'm leveling my Mage 1 skill to max. This can be done completely AFK without any manual input at all. For classes which use melee attacks, you can still use the vanilla method of attacking the invincible servants of Razlik mobs around the Dark Portal. Here's an odd tip. The act of sitting causes your character to regenerate health significantly faster, even when not eating food. Hunters have the unique ability to drop combat with feigned death. This is somewhat exploitable with NPC mobs that have some kind of minion or pet. If I attack the pet of this Felfaran hunter, kill it, and then drop combat, something interesting happens. The pet respawns quickly. You can do this again and again. You can also attack multiple pets simultaneously, making for faster experience. My level 58 hunter is a bit out of a depth here, but you can kill 4 of these mobs at once at level 60 and above. Now, this isn't an especially fast way to level, but it can be done semi-AFK with a simple series of keystrokes, or you could even make a macro and do it with one button. In fact, you could even use a mouse recorder and level up AFK, but I wouldn't recommend that unless you want to run the risk of Blizzard hitting you with a naughty stick. I've mentioned a number of times in relatively recent videos that movement abilities can be used to cancel full damage, as I'm demonstrating here. It is worth adding, however, that the quests in Toshley Station that involve throwing the player into the air can be completed instantly using Mage Blink or Warlock Demonic Circle. As you probably know if you've ever watched any mage soloing videos, pathing mechanics in the Burning Crusade are crude and exploitable. You don't have to go to the extremes people do with soloing dungeons to observe this. Here's a really simple example on the outskirts of Orkindoon. This hostile mob cannot run through this crack as my gnome can. Consequently, it is very easy for the gnome to stay out of melee range, as I'm demonstrating here. The gnome can use ranged attacks to kill the mob without being touched, which means no risk of death and no need to waste time regenerating health eating. Provided you can keep them in sync, you can actually do this with any number of mobs you can tag. Generally speaking, it is a good idea to attack mobs whilst travelling to keep your experience flowing, especially when there are guards around. It is always a good idea to tag or body pull any mobs on your way to a quest hub for this reason. The guards can draw aggro, and provided you get a minimum amount of damage, you'll get full loot. You do get reduced XP relative to the amount of damage you do, but this should cost little to no extra time. Taking this principle a little further, it is possible to do the same thing with escort quests. You can pull a bunch of mobs to, say, Skywing here, for example, and he'll tank them for you. By the way, these spiders are a great source of valuable netherweb spider silk. This is a good find. Once the mobs you've kited to Skywing are dead, he'll fly off and try and complete his escort quest. So you can only do this every so often. You'll need to abandon the quest to pick it up again. You could even simply run an escort quest repeatedly without turning it in and benefit from having an NPC tank guardian. I'd only advise doing this with rested XP, but you can get 100k experience per hour doing this with reasonable single target DPS and a decent understanding of threat mechanics. If you are grinding mobs for loot, XP, or just killing them for quests, bear in mind they are not all created equal. Some of them have quirks which can increase your farming speed. For example, these Sundered Rumbler mobs, when they die, reduce a mob half the size, which is relatively easy to kill and also awards proportionate XP. These Phase Hunters, when stunned, use an ability called Phase Slip to get out of it, but in the process they sacrifice 2000 armor, making them very vulnerable to certain types of melee attack. If you can induce lag in some way, for example just pulling out your modem cable or using a specialized piece of software like Lag 7, which I'll link to below, then you can do things like maintaining speed buffs for 8 seconds longer before you disconnect, as I've shown in vanilla and retail videos previously on this channel. What I've never mentioned is that lag can be used like stealth to bypass mobs, much as a rogue or feral druid can. Naturally, this is useful for leveling but also for gold making, but that's a subject for another video. So these are just some concepts to think about while leveling up. I deliberately kept this video fairly simple and away from the type of exploits which Blizzard might take exception to. If more advanced and game-breaking content interests you, you'll find that on my Patreon. So there's the video. If you liked it, why not subscribe? Thanks for watching. This has been Archfielder.